Okay, so my next series is about drawing and painting wildlife. And I just am going to show you a few examples in different media and slightly different styles. I have kind of my own approach and my own style. It's just the way that I paint things. And when I create the demonstrations, I'll try to let you know like what is kind of general good practice and what tends to be my own style. And it's not necessarily the best way, or it's definitely not the only way, or the best way. And so just experiment and try different approaches. Watch other people's videos and combine the approaches and techniques that work the best for you. So this is a little wood duck, and it is painted in oils. As you notice, when I paint with oils, a lot of the time I use a lot of different approaches with that, but this is actually quite transparent. I mean, it's almost like painted, like something that would be painted in watercolor and gouache, but it is oil paint. And so this is a kind of a close-up of the duck, but then there's also a little bit of the background. This is a colored pencil sketch, and I'm not finished with this, obviously. But this is all built up with colored pencil. And so I am going to try to show you the approach to creating some different textures in colored pencils that are applicable to a lot of different kinds of wildlife and nature studies. This is a hooded Merganser Hen. Okay, this is actually an acrylic painting. Well, I mean, this is a photocopy of an acrylic painting that I made. But once again, a lot of the techniques that I used are very applicable to gouache. Not so much to transparent watercolor, because I built up the different details in an opaque way. So I layered light on top of dark, whereas in watercolor you kind of go the other direction. You start with the lights, and then you add additional darks as you layer. This one is a type of gouache, and these are a little green-winged teal pair. Oh, I guess I didn't say these are ruddy ducks. And this is quite a bit different. Notice, that the water is quite a bit lighter. We do have a reflection, but it isn't the water, there isn't as much contrast in the water because the focus is more on the reflections, and I was trying to capture the personality of little green-winged teals too. This is a combination, and this has that glare on it because it's in a frame. I just didn't feel like taking these out of the frames and trying to tape them back in and everything. So this is a combination of media. It includes watercolor pencils. All of these areas are watercolor pencil of the pine cones. It includes regular colored pencils. We have those in this area. It includes gouache. And so the background, the little bird, some of these other areas have some gouache. I've layered some over here to kind of, I've layered some over here in this area of snow to kind of help. I added a little bit too much shadow there, and so it kind of helped it to come forward. So this is a combination of different media. This one is transparent watercolor, and I'll zoom out a little bit more. You can kind of see the different quality to the transparent watercolor. Other artists would have painted this with a different style, might have more contrasts, might have less. There isn't necessarily one right way to paint in any of these media. And so when I show you techniques, don't ever feel like it's prescriptive. It is more of a demonstration of what works for me. You can try it, especially if you're brand new to watercolor. Go ahead and try it, and then experiment for yourself what works for you. And then this is another acrylic painting. This one is on canvas board, and so I want to zoom in so you can kind of see the different texture that is created with the canvas. Do you see, you know, especially along the edges, you can kind of see that it almost has a woven look to it. Let me see if there's another. Okay, yeah, on his little cheek right here, you can actually see the canvas texture. And so, you know, as you choose your, not only your media, but also your support, you know, whether it is rough watercolor paper, which is going to have some more texture, whether it's smooth watercolor paper or a canvas board, all of those will affect the type of textures that you can achieve with the paint and what's going to kind of show through. The canvas boards are not going to work that well with transparent watercolor, but they work great with acrylic, and they work great with oil paints. I don't think they are going to work real well with colored pencils either, but you know, I might be wrong about that. Somebody might have a certain technique that they use that it works perfectly, and but just for me it doesn't. So something to keep in mind. All right, so that's acrylic. And what I'm going to do in this series is I have some small little sketches which I have created using the organizational line approach. So if you need to learn how to sketch, then I encourage you to watch the I think it's called How to Sketch Accurate Proportions, or Sketching Accurate Proportions, which is another video that I have, and that will help you to kind of compare different angles and different proportions and enable you to just draw, you know, from life. Let's see, I've got to have more than that. Okay, here we go. And then this is a moth, okay, and I'm going to do some of these, like I'll do this one in gouache, which is, you know, I'll also use a little bit of transparent watercolor. This one I'll use watercolor, and then I will also add some colored pencil, so you can kind of see the colored pencil approach with a background that's been already painted. And then this one I'll just use transparent watercolor. This is some little Honeycrisp apple blossoms that I have in my yard in the spring, and I'll be using my own photographs for these. And if you're taking one of my classes, you'll have access to you know, a whole bunch of my photos for reference, so that you can use ones that are not under copyright. All right, so I'll be starting out with this one. Okay, for this particular example, I actually have both a three-dimensional physical specimen and some reference photographs. It's always nice to have both, because, you know, that way you can kind of, you know, really look at it and notice some things that you might have missed because of the lighting, because of the focus, because of the angle when you're taking a photograph. This is a little female Hyalophora columbia, and I believe it's the Glovery subspecies. And you notice how ragged her wings are. So to start out, I have to decide what I want to do with the background. It's always a good idea to work on the background first. So deciding on the background is a little bit hard to decide sometimes. You know, you want it to not take away from the main subject, but then at the same time you're not necessarily wanting to draw too much attention away from the main subject. And I think that I am going to leave this pretty much blank, because I've activated the spaces pretty well by enlarging the moth so much that we have separate sections of the background. But I am going to add a little bit of shadow underneath her, and I did not draw the little branch that she was clinging to, and I think that that will, you know, kind of add a little bit of interest as well. And I'm not doing the whole thing. I'm just gonna add a little bit. Once again, my goal is to just kind of activate the background, not make it draw attention away from the main subject. Okay, so for the background, there's just going to be some shadow, so I'm actually just going to pretty much leave that for now, and I'm just going to focus on the moth herself. Okay, so I want to pay attention to the different colors that are shown on the image and look at some of the lightest tones, kind of the underlying shade in different areas. So this area where it's kind of reddish, it has kind of a warm, peachy, reddish glow. And then it has the highlights of a little bit more yellowish, and then it has deeper shadows of a little bit more burgundy. But that mid-tone is kind of what I'm wanting to go for, except maybe a little bit lighter than what it actually is, because I'll be building up these tones with colored pencil. And then the underlying tone here is almost like a lavender purpley color. I mean, it's mostly gray, but there's a element of that. Then obviously we have areas that are black and areas that are white, which I won't worry as much about at this point. So that really nice warm color, I'm going to use some, this is Scarlet, I think it's Scarlet Lake, and some Permanent Rose. And I have some other colors just kind of mixed in there. I don't worry too much about all that. So this just provides kind of a background on which to build your colored pencil textures and colors, and so it just makes it a little bit easier to get that full coverage, whereas if you're starting from scratch, like I was on the hooded Merganser, it just takes a lot more work to get that completely covered. And if you have any kinds of difficulties with your hands, whether tendinitis or arthritis or anything like that, it can make a difference whether you really enjoy painting something and drawing something, or whether it just feels really painful and stressful. If you end up going over a little bit into an area that you don't want to be painted that color, it's not the end of the world. So when you're working with colored pencil on top of these colors, you can always kind of cover that up. Okay, so that's kind of the basic underlying layer of that color. And now for, let's see, I think this is Ultramarine Violet. And then down here, there's a little bit of a golden color. I'm actually going to use some yellow ochre, maybe a touch of this yellow, which I'm not sure what yellow that is, and try to find a clean spot on my... So that's the first layer of just kind of basic color. It also makes it a little bit easier for you as you are working in such detail with the colored pencil. It's kind of like a little bit paint by number, but it's one that you have created yourself. So it's just as creative as any other approach. It's just that you have kind of the basic instructions and general idea down already.